Hi fans, I am back for the second part of the question and answer series, and this time I am answering questions you sent in that concern the first book in the series, Sweet Lucidity. I have your questions right here, so let's get started. Yes, Sweet Lucidity is my first novel. With everyone who writes their first novel, they use their own reality as a security blanket, which is commonly referred to as a muse. Behind every character is a person I developed a relationship with in my life. Every event the characters in the book experience is based off my own reality. The entire book is anchored from what my life was, is, and might have been. For it to read as a memoir is because of that. Every author is a reader. And of course, in every person's life, there is art, music, and movies that influence our lives in various ways. The very first vampire novel I ever read was Carmilla by Le Fanu, and which of course led me to read Bram Stoker's Dracula. At a young age, I was hooked with any novel that explored vampirism or immortality. And of course, Anne Rice ended up becoming an author that was very much an inspiration to me. She influenced my writing as well as fantastic films such as The Hunger, starring David Bowie. That is an amazing film that explores immortality. But for me, I always desired a different take on vampires. And it just never was fully realized with the numerous books and movies that were coming out. So when I wrote Sweet Lucidity, I brought to life my own vision of what a vampire is and how they come to be, how they live, how they love, and how they experience a time that is endless. But in my vision of vampires, that time that is endless can just as easily be lost. Well, as I mentioned in the first part of the question and answer series, David was a very important person in my life and still is today. Um, we spent our childhood together. We experienced new things that brought us so close together that our bond was inseparable. We considered each other soulmates. It was always Melissa David and David and Melissa. Um, when we were teenagers, I became pregnant and I left a disastrous marriage at the same time. He was there for me the entire time, supporting my decisions, being an ear to listen to my worries. Uh, he asked me to marry him, but I was 15. I was going through a divorce. I was attending college full time and working full time, and he was just starting his life. And I did not want to put him in a position where he had to fulfill the role of a husband as well as a father. Um, it was just too soon. But I made him promise that he'd ask me again. Um, and as we became older, our lives would meet, but it was never for too long. It was just brief interactions, that we always wished were longer, but for some reason our lives kept pulling us away from each other. It wasn't until it was too late that he was going to fulfill his promise. I was told by mutual friends that he was going to ask me marry him, and I was prepared. The time was right for both of us. However, for whatever reason, a person that we never thought would hurt him ended up being the one to kill him. Everyone lost their best friend, their son, their brother, their father, their soulmate. Though our fates were intertwined so many times, they never came together as one. So it was through Sweet Lucidity that I was able to change that fate, even if it was through words on paper. In the end, David lives on in the book. and where those of us who knew him can return to those memories that we are so fond of and imagine what could have been. Oh, good question. It is a commentary on today's society. As adults, we seem to not want to acknowledge that our children as young as 12 are having sex. Most of the time, unprotected sex. I attended a private school, and my memories go back as early as sixth grade of hearing my friends talk about plans of losing their virginity or relating to the experience with little regard to the consequences that could rise from it. Looking back, there were no conversations that happened in school or in the home that address the reality and responsibility that comes with being sexually active. We as adults have the responsibility to acknowledge that our children and teens are having sex and to educate them on the reality and consequences that might happen, such as sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy, and the social stigma that ultimately happens when peers use the sexuality of others as a way of social condemnation. In the book, David is very distressed when he learns that Melissa is no longer a virgin. It brings about the idea that there is something to holding on to your virginity. The experience of losing your virginity to someone you love, while children and teens are perfectly capable of having sex, they are not prepared for the emotions that come with it. We must be proactive in educating and mentoring those likely to have sex at such a young age, and also continue the conversation for those who are already sexually active. Uh, we need to be real, and we need to let our children have access to the reality of making adult decisions. There are differences, however, these are not addressed in Sweet Lucidity, but later in the later books in the series. Cold bloods take on a different scent as they get older, especially if their soul is spoiled and it comes out to the surface, changing how others perceive them. As warm bloods grow older, their bodies naturally fail them. Um, so imagine the smell of rotting and death. Um, it will change the sweetness that naturally comes from them. In the third novel of the series, more of their physiology is revealed and examined, but as for now, they are simply the essence of sweet. Warm bloods and cold bloods are very complex races, much more than the humans who are changed by vampires sometime in their life. I really enjoyed exploring the nature of warm bloods and cold bloods. I didn't see it necessary to include another race of vampire. Uh, but more of these races are explored in future books in the series, so keep reading on. Vampires can only control whether they want to relive memories or see the future. They cannot control what they see in the future as they can control which memory to relive. Um, However, when vampires sleep together, as Melissa and David do in Dragonfly, one can control what the other sees, sharing their memories between each other and seeing the future together. I think we can all look in our past and acknowledge that there was always someone who pursued and tempted us. Um, for Melissa, she always knew that she was meant to be with David, but Ryan didn't know that. He wanted her. And but with fate, you sometimes cannot see who your soulmate is until it's too late. Melissa did consider it, but she already knew she was supposed to be with David, and she knew it'd be reckless to fall for Ryan. Uh, she loved Ryan with all her heart, but she didn't want to lose him or David by changing the path that she was supposed to take. She already knew in such a short time what love truly was and who she was supposed to love. Let's see, Fredericksburg is located just north of San Antonio. It is a charming town with German roots, and you can see it in their architecture, their food, the atmosphere, uh, their culture. If you ever travel to Fredericksburg, you will understand why I chose it to be the home for Sweet Lucidity. Let's see, the Baker Hotel is located in Mineral Wells, west of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. If you go downtown, you cannot miss it. It towers above the skyline. It is a grand place. Back in its day, it was publicized amongst high society and celebrities as a place to retreat to for experiencing their healing spas with their, miraculous water. It was simply a luxurious accommodation. During its prime, it was a beautiful resort. It was visited by celebrities and socialites. And just by looking at it today, you can still see the charm it possesses. I mean, it is enchanting and haunting. You just simply, you have to look at their website. You have to look at the photographs of the Baker Hotel. You will understand why, and you'll get to see small little glimpses in the ruins of what it used to be. All the locations in Sweet Lucidity do exist, though I did take some artistic license upon some. So many fans fell in love with Andrew, and I completely understand that. For that reason, I have decided to write a book based upon his life, and it'll explore how he became a vampire, his struggle with immortality, and how ultimately that immortality ended for him. A special treat to fans is that it will explore his experiences when he met the others, as well as his own feelings for Melissa. Um, I plan to finish it after the fourth book in the series is released, so it'll be a while, but I promise you it'll be well worth the wait. I decided to name the main characters after David and myself because of the promise I made to him. And our lives together was the reason this book came into existence to begin with. As for the events Melissa experiences, yes, they are based off real life. They had to be. That's all I had writing this book. However, now, for me, Sweet Lucidity is now in this eternal dream state where uh, reality is elevated into a different existence rooted in fantasy. For those of us, though, who know the reality, it is where we can relive the memories we remember, and kind of understand what could have been. For readers, it's a world that you're invited to participate in, to relate and find yourself in one of the characters, or just be an observer. Gee, that sounds a lot like how vampires sleep, doesn't it? Melissa's pregnancy in the book is very much based off my own experience with pregnancy. I only know of one existence of what childbirth is like, and for me it was not pleasant, even though the result was a beautiful son. Um, but I could have lost him at any time during that, and my body was just not developed enough. It was not ready to sustain a healthy, normal pregnancy. And I was certainly not prepared for what I experienced. I really enjoyed riding the Masquerade myself, and I really wished it lasted longer than it did. Uh, but as it often happens, the story writes itself, and the author ends up simply being an instrument of placing words on the page. For me, the Masquerade is very symbolic. Though another one quite like it will never happen again, um, there will be an event that happens in the third book that for those of you who enjoyed the Masquerade will uh, also appreciate. You got me. Okay. Not all locations in Sweet Lucidity exist in real life, though the chapel itself does. It's located in Lubbock, Texas. It's the St. Paul's Chapel. However, the environment the chapel exists in the book is just pure imagination from a dream I had. Antonio is a villain I come to love to hate, and there is a personal backstory behind him that maybe someday I'll reveal. But he does continue to provoke Melissa and David in the world of Dragonfly. Uh, but for those of you waiting to see what fate becomes of him, you should be very pleased after reading Dragonfly. Before I wrote Lucidity, I wrote screenplays. My dream was to always have something I wrote come to life on the big screen. When I wrote Sweet Lucidity, it was naturally written to make an impact visually for the reader so that it does play out like a movie, because if it ever does become one, which is a dream of mine, it's my ultimate goal, remember? If it becomes a reality that Sweet Lucidity is made into a film, I want how I envisioned it to come across clearly. And with what I hear from you, that shouldn't be a problem at all. That's an interesting observation, one that I don't get many times, but I'm always excited when I do because it's important. Immortality is all about time. Um, it's a test of time, really. Living for centuries, the world advances at such a rate that losing time is something risked. The vampires live with so many clocks around them because it's a metaphor that time runs their life, and at any moment it can easily stop. I absolutely loved writing the scene where David changes Melissa. Ugh, it resolved so many feelings for me, and because of that, I wanted it to be special. With no other experience in the book like it. For any character who has changed in the series, I want it to be very personal for that character. Unforgettable and like no other. And it's for that reason that the scene where David changes Melissa, that will not be replicated. That is their experience and their only experience. I have always been fascinated by Malinke. Her legacy is so hotly debated. And whether you love her or you hate her, she has a history that's unlike any other. So I really enjoyed bringing a historical figure into Sweet Lucidity, and though I wish I could have written more of her, she and her people do return in future books for a brief appearance. The vampires can only see the future in their sleep. However, when they meet others, they can sometimes sense something about them, whether it's a relationship to them or an experience that is yet to happen, kind of like deja vu or a sense of familiarity. That's why many of them go to sleep, so that they can foresee the impact of decisions they make and the people that they come in contact with. Not all vampires in the series sleep in coffins. That's just the personal preferences, some of them. You'll just have to read on in the series to see how other vampires sleep. Thank you so very much. That was the goal, to bring readers into the story, into the feel of the characters. I'm so glad that was accomplished. Thank you. Yes, the story does return to Israel. I wanted to introduce readers to it in Sweet Lucidity because it ends up being such an important location in future books of the series, particularly Jerusalem. So you kind of see, where it's going. Yes, it will. The fourth book in the series will revolve heavily around religion and ancient beliefs. I introduce this gradually so that you're not overwhelmed with it so early on. I think it's only natural to include faith when speaking of immortality, so it will play an important role as the series continues. Well, that's it. That concludes this part of the series of answering questions for Sweet Lucidity. I hope I answered your questions, and if yours was not included, it will be in future series. Next week, I will be answering questions related to Dragonfly. So thank you all again, and thank you for all the support. Much love. Bye-bye.